Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dakota Hufford. I'm the Communications and Program Coordinator for CRBC. I'm joined by Amy Barton, our Program and Stewardship Manager, as well as Eric Butler, our Riparian Specialist. Many of us are joining from Oregon and Washington, and I'd like to take a moment to recognize that we are gathered on the unceded land of many Native peoples. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the many communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. We thank those who came before us for their stewardship of these lands and waters, and those who continue to steward them now and in the future. Our schedule, we're going to do a really brief CRBC intro, talk about what is an urban habitat oasis, getting started and maximizing habitat value, some seasonal selections, the four habitat essentials: attracting beneficial insects, accepting some damage, some budget-friendly enhancement ideas, backyard habitat certification program information, and a Q&A. Here at the Clackamas River Basin Council, our mission is to foster partnerships for clean water, to improve fish and wildlife habitat, and enhance the quality of life for those who live, work, and recreate within the Clackamas River Basin. CRBC is a 501c3 nonprofit watershed council, and for the past 20 years, we have been investing in restoring and protecting the Clackamas River and its tributaries. We do this through in-stream and riparian restoration projects, volunteer events, and educational workshops such as this. We also offer streamside residents with free weed removal and native tree and shrub planting through our Shade Our Streams program. All of our work is aimed at improving the Clackamas River and its tributaries, but we couldn't do this work without people like you, so thank you so much for being here.
All right, so let's jump right in. What is an urban habitat oasis? So our idea of this habitat oasis is a space where you attract and provide habitat for a diverse community of plants and wildlife. It's also a place where you want to spend time and a space that you are proud of. It's of course always nice when the neighbors are cool with your yard. You know, you don't want to get those phone calls about your unruly yard from your neighbors. So the ideas that we're going to share are neighborhood friendly. There's also many gardening styles out there, ranging from very manicured lawns to more like chaos type gardens. Wildlife may prefer more of a wild and chaotic space, but there's ways to create habitat for them while still maintaining that curb appeal. So we're going to talk about that. So when you're getting started, we recommend thinking of some of your favorite places. And you can start just by collecting images or ideas. So we have some inspiration from places that we enjoy on the screen. So there's a photo from Bosque Dell Nursery there on the left, and a picture of Camassia on the right, and one from Middle Earth, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan like we are. And this exercise can just sort of jumpstart your creativity, and you might notice that you're drawn to certain colors or textures or just overall styles. Okay, so after you're good and inspired, we need to start plotting our space. And this is especially true if you're starting from scratch. If you already have established plans and you want to just add to your space, you can still do this exercise, but just working around what you have. When you're space planning, it's good to consider the sunlight patterns in your yard. You can do this by taking a photo of your space at different times of the day, like 1 in the morning, in midday, and then in the late afternoon. Different plants will thrive better depending on that light that you have. So it's good just to kind of get an idea of where that light is at what time. You can also check your soil type using a variety of techniques. There is an online database available through the National Resource Conservation Service. There's soil layers that you can use based on your area. It takes some doing to get in there and play with it, but it's really fun to do. There's a link in the resources section that we're going to share at the end. You can also do a good old-fashioned, by hand soil analysis to see if you have more clay, loam, or sandy soil. If you're in the Willamette Valley like we are, there's a good chance that you have a soil type called Jori. It's very common here. It's a volcanic basalt-based soil that's rich in iron, clay, and nutrients, and it has kind of a reddish color to it. Also, when you're planning your space, you can consider your moisture levels throughout your yard. So you may have dry and wet spaces. You can also think about the height and width of individual plants that you either have or want to have. So something that's, really small right now when you buy it might get 15 feet tall. So you don't want to put it, directly in front of your veggie garden. So just kind of planning out all of those things and writing it down is always really helpful. Okay, so during this space planning, you can think of your garden in zones. So creating layers in your garden can add depth and dimension and some visual interest. So layering involves arranging your plants in different tiers or levels by height, color, and texture. And this technique can really make your yard feel larger and more dynamic. So in the foreground area, you can consider low growing plants and ground covers. So if you want to go native, we like ferns, bleeding hearts, kinnikinnick, oxalis, and fringe cup. I also really like woodland strawberry for that ground cover. You can also incorporate herbs too, like creeping, thyme, and rosemary. And then for that middle layer, it should be kind of medium height perennials and shrubs like salmonberry, goat's beard, Douglas spirea, dwarf Oregon grape, or maybe larger ferns like sword fern. And if you're looking for edible additions, you can consider salmonberry, huckleberry, and thimbleberry too. All delicious choices. And lastly, your back layer can be taller shrubs or even small trees like vine maple, red flowering currant, Pacific ninebark, ocean spray, or red twig dogwood. So after your space is all planned out, the next step is just getting in there, doing it, making it happen. So this is showing the transition from what was a lawn on the upper left picture to more of a thriving garden. So it does take some time. This was about a year-long process, but that lawn there isn't going to support a lot of biodiversity, right? But once you move into this garden with lots of different plants and flowers, you're going to support a lot more critters and offer a lot more food for native insects and other wildlife.
And adrenaline dog, fucking dog.
Alrighty, so now we will get into kind of how to maximize your habitat value. Gardens with various colors and textures are pleasing to the eye and will also attract lots of different types of wildlife and beneficial insects. Different bees, beetles, flies, and butterflies are attracted to different colors and different scents. Also, do not underestimate the power of native grasses and forbs. They are not only flowers, but they have different textures and offer different types of benefits. Native grasses are host plants for many beneficial insects and can really add to an overall garden aesthetic. Consider some high value habitat plants as well. And what we mean by that is plants that benefit many types of insects and wildlife all at the same time. This graphic here was created by researchers at the Oregon State Extension Service. You can see that more types of bee species visited the Douglas aster, farewell to spring clarkia, California poppy, and the globegelia and the rose checker mallow. These are great additions to your garden and can attract more pollinators, and they can also help pollinate, which also help pollinate edible plants you may have as well. If you have a smaller yard space, you can definitely still do a lot. Container plantings do require a bit more upkeep with watering through the dry months, but provide excellent habitat and forage for wildlife. There are 3 kinds of plants that can perform 3 different functions in planters: thrillers, fillers, and spillers. Thrillers are the attention grabbers and do best when they can be the tallest in the pot. Oregon grape is a good one. Fillers add mass and texture to the arrangement. Ground cover species are often good for this. And spillers soften the container's edges by spilling over and giving a flowing look while adding to plant variety as well. When you are planting in the ground, you want to aim to plant in species bundles of 3 to 5 plants, and you want to leave some openings in between the plants as well. This will allow them to grow big and take over that little spot, and will also serve as habitat for ground nesting insects.
So one part of creating a habitat oasis that can be kind of a fun exercise is gardening to ensure that each season there's something in bloom or just something of visual interest. So to do this, you can create a list of plants that you would like to incorporate and then consider their bloom time. So, when you're doing this exercise, you may notice, for example, that you don't have anything blooming in the fall. So then you can think about plants or look up plants that might have that fall bloom time. So here are some ideas for plants that bloom in the spring. We love the red flowering currant. I think we've already mentioned it in this webinar, but it just has the most beautiful pink flowers, and the shrub does get pretty big too. So when it's in bloom, it's just really beautiful. We also love the Oregon iris, which is great for those kind of moister spaces, and the Western trillium as well, which only has one special flower each year, so never pick. But it really likes those shady areas. We also love woodland strawberry, which is just a lovely ground cover that also has edible berries on it. And all of these plants are native and will attract a variety of wildlife species in the spring. And here are some more ideas for a bright and sunny summer garden. We have the Oregon sunshine, which is not only very beautiful, but it is also the host plant for a variety of butterflies. The painted lady, the orange sulfur, the red admiral, commas, and skippers all require the Oregon sunshine. That's the host plant for those butterflies. We also have the farewell to spring, which has really pretty pink flowers with little dots on them, and it'll attract a lot of moths, including the Clark's sphinx, the Pacific green sphinx, the white lined sphinx, and the Clark's day sphinx moths. The yellow monkey flower there is a great ground cover option for moister areas. Some of our friends at CRBC have had a lot of luck growing those wildflowers from seeds. And the yarrow there is a great option that attracts lots of pollinating beetles and flies, and also does well in dry spaces in the sun. So for fall selections, many of these are in bloom right now. We have the goldenrod, which produces cute little yellow flowers and attracts a wide variety of pollinators. The Douglas aster that Dakota mentioned earlier attracts so many different types of pollinators and is a very high value flower overall for pollinating insects. The pearly everlasting is a very easy to grow flower that likes disturbed areas, and it will keep blooming through the late fall. So it's a great option for a later blooming plant. And then the Cascade penstemon offers very lovely purple color flowers in the fall, and it likes to grow in more rocky soil types if you have that type of space in your yard. And here is some ideas for winter plants. Not all of these are flowering. The red osier dogwood will not be in bloom, of course. It will have lost its leaves in the winter, but those vibrant red stems are just so striking in the winter time, especially when there's some snow in the background. So we really love that one. The alpine heather is very, very pretty and also will flower through the winter and is a great winter snack for any bees and other insects that are still awake during that time. The rhododendrons, I'm sure most people are familiar with those. Some of them will bloom through the winter, and they just have kind of a nice pop of color. And then rosemary, which of course is not native, but it's a great choice for a winter bloom, and it has, of course, lots of culinary purposes. So we also recommend that one.
Okay, so let's talk about the 4 habitat essentials. Wildlife need these 4 essentials to thrive in your urban habitat oasis: food, water, cover or shelter, and places to raise young. Starting with food, the most important way to offer food is through native plants. Wildlife will eat the seeds, berries, nuts, foliage, pollen, and nectar. When you're attracting birds, remember that they need more than just plants to survive. 96% of terrestrial birds rely on invertebrates to feed their young. 90% of insects that feed on plants can only survive on those that are native to the region. Moth, caterpillars, spiders, and crickets are the most important invertebrates for birds. You can provide water with a water feature, such as a bird bath, fountain, toad abode, or a small pond. And you can offer cover and shelter with bird and bat boxes and bee hotels. Your vegetable or fruit or herb garden provides habitat too. Consider leaving the leaves and the stalks, especially of the pithy stems, at the end of the season when plants are going dormant for beneficial insects to make their home in so they can get through the winter and feed on those spring babies. Feed those spring babies, not on them. Beneficial insects. The vast majority of insects that we see are not pests. It is just a few select species that really disrupt our desirable plants, which we consider pesty or bad. So really most bugs you see would be considered beneficials. You want more bugs. The definition of a beneficial insect is broad, being it is any number of species of insect that can perform valued services. These services can range from pollination to detrivorous function to predation. In general, there are 4 categories that beneficial insects can fall into: pollinators, predators, parasitoids, and detritivores. And so attracting them to your yard, the 4 habitat essentials also apply to attracting beneficial insects. They need food, habitat, and water, all 3 of which combined will provide space for reproduction. So you want to plant a variety of native plants always, and leave bare ground for ground nesters, and add a water feature, especially during the dry months. And in order to attract and keep insects, avoid things like over manicuring your yard, so leave the leaves and leave it messy. Avoid releasing non-native insects like ladybugs from nurseries, and avoid using all chemical pesticides. If you are seeing some leaf damage, that means that you're feeding an insect, and it can be considered a win. You may also accidentally create a deer buffet with your vegetable garden, but just look at how cute they are. Accepting a little damage in advance will help, and finding that balance that works for you to keep it will help keep your habitat sustainable.
So it might seem like kind of a big undertaking to transform a yard into an urban habitat oasis, but there are a lot of budget-friendly options available that you can consider. So a bird bath is a really great option that you can include to provide water for wildlife and insects, or even like a micro pond, like the image there on the right. That pond on the screen has a few small native plants and also has some non-native floating plants in there too. But a pond like this doesn't require a bubbler or anything fancy, and you may attract frogs to this little pond who may come and lay egg masses in there, such as the Pacific porous tree frog. So this is a great option to provide both a place to raise young and shelter, and also water. So 3 things just in one little thing that you can do on a budget. Seeding an area of your yard is also a great option to cover a lot of ground at a low price. So just those 3 seed packets there on the screen were less than $15, but it's enough to cover 900 square feet with native meadow and prairie plants. So it's a great option to cover a lot of ground with not a big budget, especially if you're just taking out a bunch of grass and then you want to put something in. You could take the grass out in the fall and you could seed these now, and then by the time spring comes around, you'll have lots of sprouts coming up. So highly recommend something like that. Chip drop is also great too for mulching. So you can contact Chip Drop or just your local arborist, and you can often get a free delivery of bark chips right to your house. And you can use that bark mulch to put around plants to retain moisture in the summer and also to protect plants in the winter time. That also just helps with your soil overall and creates healthier soil when you're adding mulch. I used a thick layer of mulch to remove a patch of lawn, and it worked great. I put about 5 to 6 inches of mulch over a big area and the grass is gone. So that's another option too, to really help jumpstart a transition. And you can also make your own little wildlife shelters and even get the family involved. So making a toad abode, like the one on the screen, or a little insect hotel is a really fun way to get kids or other family members or neighbors involved in your Habitat Oasis projects. Lots of fun things to do out there. And many of you may know about the Backyard Habitat Certification Program, but if you have not applied, I encourage you to do so. They are full of resources for yards of all different sizes. They can help you with your design ideas and maintenance plans, and it's completely free, and you even get plant coupons to use at local nurseries. Okay, so one last thing that we can do in our urban habitat oasis is to protect wildlife from hazards. One of the biggest hazards to birds at home is our windows. So, windows take the lives of up to 1 billion birds in the USA alone. It's a big number, but you can help prevent this by installing bird-safe window decals. They look clear to us, but they look vibrant to birds. So the image on the lower left shows that. You do need quite a few of them, like one every foot on your windows, but they make a big difference. So highly recommend those. Another big danger to birds and many other wildlife is cats, outdoor cats. The Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute estimates that cats kill between 1.4 and 3.7 billion birds and over 15 billion mammals each year in the US alone. Those are shocking numbers, I know, but there is some small data that putting those bird-safe collars, like in the picture, can help prevent these deaths by cats because they stand out. I guess bells might not do much because birds and other animals don't associate the sound of the bell, with certain death. But these collars might work. But really, the best thing that you can do is just keep your cats inside, especially during those peak migration times in the spring and late summer, fall. Migratory songbirds are particularly prone to cat deaths more than our resident birds. So just keeping them inside is a good idea. You can also practice pesticide-free gardening, like Dakota mentioned. This will protect all the wildlife, insects, birds, and mammals. And then disease is another big one that you can help protect against. So you can do that by cleaning your bird feeders. Cleaning them frequently is important, but even more so during the winter, because damp weather paired with birds flocking to the feeders can increase the potential for diseases to spread, including salmonella. Last winter, there was a big salmonella outbreak in this area. It's also important to not only clean, but also sanitize the feeders. So a good routine is to clean your feeders with soapy water, rinse, and soak with a solution of 1 part household bleach to 10 parts of water, and allow it to sit for about 10 minutes and then rinse and dry. So I actually didn't know this, that you were supposed to clean your bird feeders that often, at least once a year, but it is pretty important. And then if you just, if you see any illness among your birds, just remove your feeders right away and keep them for at least 2 weeks inside. And then lastly, cleaning hummingbird feeders very frequently is important for their health. So sanitizing with white vinegar weekly in the winter and every other day when the temperatures are high is really important for those hummingbirds. Okay, this has been a long list of resources, but don't worry, we're going to email these out, and they're also going to be in the description on YouTube. But this is here as a placeholder. We have lots of things to say. There's so much information out there.
No. Hi.
So we'll make sure that you get that list. All right, that's pretty much it. Thank you all so much for doing your part. Our watershed here in the Clackamas, like many others, is rapidly changing due to development. Many streams and natural areas are heavily impacted by these changes. But, by stewarding your own space and helping spread the word to others about creating your own and their own habitat, urban habitat oasis, you can help mitigate these environmental changes. So we appreciate you watching and being here. And then here's just a short recap of and some final thoughts of how you can steward your space. Just planning and getting to know your space and planning out those layers in your garden is important. Patience is key. It takes time. You're not going to do it overnight, but you can do it. And then maximizing that habitat value is going to be important. So look for those high value plants and habitat ideas, and then attract the bugs. So if you'll build it, they will come, and bugs feed everything else. So they are very important to attract. And then lastly, just protecting all of those wildlife, those bugs and wildlife that you attract.
And one final call to action. If you are a Clackamas Basin resident, please consider taking our pesticide pledge. You'll receive an awesome yard sign, and it'll show your friends and neighbors your commitment to keeping our water clean. And we can pop the link in the chat. And that is all. If there are any questions.